goodness. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting, I'd like to think it's exciting. I think it's exciting. Are you excited, Dustin Kava? Like when we fire this up, when we get ready to go and I say, hey, everybody, it's another exciting episode of Because Cannabis on Wayward Media, and I do all that promo stuff. Do you in your bones and in your Jones start to feel the excitement bubbling up? Does it start to gurgle within the loins? Like, oh my God, I'm about to make cannabis branding magic. Does that happen? Is that the thought process?
It's not so much about that. It is, to me, it's unlocking the door. We are creating something that is open to the community to respond to, and that is what gets me fired up. It's just another entry point to start a conversation that can make a difference, or that makes a difference within myself, which is awesome.
I like it. I think you're fired up. You sound fired up. I am fired up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on another brand new episode of Because Cannabis every single week on YouTube at 4:20 p.m. Please subscribe if you haven't done so. We would really appreciate it. Climb it up there in the subscribers. Dustin Kava, look at us. We're getting there. Slow but steady. A chugga chew chew. Oh, saw an interesting question. I read it, by the way. How many chuggas before the chew? How many chuggas before the chew? If you're going to do the onomatopoeia of train sounds.
Chew. Chugga, chew.
All right, you're a double deucer there. A chugga, chew. All right, answering those questions everyone wants to know the answer to, as well as subscribing. If you want to know the answer, if you want to learn about cannabis, that's why you're here. Because Cannabis every Wednesday on YouTube, 4:20 p.m. Please subscribe to get the latest news and updates, as well as on anywhere that you listen to audio. This show is available: Apple Play or Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, all those good places. You can find the Because Cannabis show. We put those episodes out on Monday. Brand new episodes out on Monday. Thank you for joining us. Had a string of a couple great guests to start the year off. Flying solo today, Dustin. Just me and you. I'm looking forward to it. We're having a bit of a reflective period. It's the new year, right? We've already had a couple of shows talking about resolutions and how we go forward. So we're going to reflect a little bit. Not just so much about the show. We did that already, but let's reflect about us, maybe us on where we are today, and maybe people who are new. You know, that's one of our passions that combines us as new people getting into this industry and trying to help them along. But I'll get to that in a second, Dustin. Are you a clumsy person? Would you classify yourself as graceful on that scale, right? If it's like runs into every gosh darn door all the daytime, or, you know, ballet Lord of the Flies dude, not Lord of the Flies, Lord of the Dance. Where are you at on the graceful scale?
I classify myself as a Neanderthal. So I feel like a caveman. I feel like I trip over everything. I go to grab the glass and I just break it. I'm that guy who just is not self-aware of himself in the space around him. So I am always, there's bruises everywhere, all over me. You'll hear twice a night me like, my toe! Oh, you know, it's awesome.
I am exactly the same way. I was thinking about, because today's theme of the Because Cannabis show was, you know, if I could travel back in time basically and tell myself a younger version of myself what I would like to know, what would it? And so I come to you today, Dustin, a scarred human. You know, I rock my just above average, which takes a lot of work and a lot of creams and a American Psycho-like daily regimen of products to make this slightly above average. You're welcome, America. But I also am quite clumsy. And so I come to you today slightly scarred. I know you can see it. I know the world can see it. I feel like this teeny tiny dot on here is the size of planet Earth on my head right now. Yesterday, I always feel like in these clumsy moments that I wish I could go back in time and be like, don't do that. I'm going to go full disclosure here, right? Changing the toilet paper roll, had taken the cardboard, right? The 3 or 4 inch long cylindrical object, right? I'd taken it off, had removed the last couple pieces of paper, and I went to toss it into the trash can, and then had a moment of reflection. It was like, oh man, I should probably recycle this. Like I should do good for the planet.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I have these guilty, sustainable moments where something like that in our recycle, because I do recycle a lot of cardboard, but it's in the like the kitchen where the normal food is, and I'm upstairs and I'm like, convenience versus like save the planet Earth shit, right? And so I chose to go grab it, and in that moment I just saw the bottom of the trash can where the toilet was a clean bag, right? I just had to reach my hand in And I didn't think about the corner of the vanity that sat between me and the basket. And so I just literally went full in, like all gas, no brakes, like with a reckless abandon. If I had to say where I fall on the graceful, clumsy scale, it's with reckless abandon. I do most things in life, just quick, fast, get it done. It is graceful in some moments and convenient and helpful in some moments, but most times it does result in physical harm to myself. So went in, smacked it, cut right open. I felt like a wrestler that had cut themselves. Out of the Anthony Trav, talked a little wrestling recently. Like I could cut himself and open because it was just that thin forehead crease of a 50-year-old man starting to bleed out. But I totally sold it too. I was like, "Vah!" Like you would have thought that I was just like smacked in the head. But I wish in those moments I could have someone whisper in my ear, like, I'm future you, don't do that. Right? Doesn't happen that way. If we had future us always in our ear, we probably would all be more successful. But that's what we're going to try to do today. That's kind of our theme. Less
my
harmful.
Cheeks hurt from laughing and smiling at that.
That's a good show. It's a good way to start, right? It's a good way to start. We got some, a serious-ish show, our last show with David Patton. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. A lot of people talking about the David Patton episode. More people in a while have reached out to me, enjoyed the show. So shout out to David Patton as well. Go check out that episode, our previous episode of Because Cannabis.
Was such an awesome episode.
Yeah, it was a fun one, right? Every Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube. Brand new shows every Monday on audio at Meet WM Socially and Wayward Media. That's who brings you this show. Hopefully, we've been teasing for a long time. We are the big tease here, Dustin. Getting some new shows launched soon, so hopefully getting some of those going. If I could go back in time, I would not start promoting new shows coming to Wayward Media from day one. I would start now. Right, when we're a little closer to that. But we talk cannabis here on the industry or on the podcast on Because Cannabis. So we talk cannabis here. So let's talk that. Let's have some reflections. Let's have some things if we could go back in time and tell our future selves. We'll talk about the main bullet point and then kind of dissect them a little bit. So if I had to open up, Dustin, and we've talked about working at the Cleveland School of Cannabis where I do. You have a lot of experience mentoring entrepreneurs and such. It's always that we talk about this passion, like helping new people get into it. And before we get into some of these new things, how do you find people, Dustin, receptively when you speak about these things? Do you think when you talk about these aspects, do you feel like young people, like not young, but new people trying to get into the industry listen, or do you find people more stubborn? Like, I know what I know. What has been your experience in mentorship with some people and their receptiveness of your advice about cannabis? Do they take it as seriously or do they brush it off?
That really depends on environment. If I was in a certain degree walking or talking into a classroom or something where they had to be there and then they're hearing me talk, my expectation is a little bit different of them. I actually almost have none. It's mostly that freedom to just say, this is my experience and I hope you can take something away. But when in owning the retail space, it was so incredible. The ones that actually came to me for advice, the ones that seek it out, you already know that perception is already broken. They want to hear what you have to say. And, it's not about internalizing it in the moment. It's about, can you actually watch them internalize it over the next couple months and see it change their daily actions? And there's something about that, what the difference between coming to you or speaking in front of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I should say before we get started, these are just a few things, right? A few things that we, when kind of thinking about the show, thought about. Clearly, there's a lot more that you could offer and advice to someone about cannabis. So if you have any things that you wish you knew before getting into the cannabis industry, please leave it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Go to our social media at MeetWM. Let us know. Yeah, anything that you think could go back. A lot of you that listen to this show are cannabis industry people. So what would you offer up to someone from back in time? If you could travel back, what would you tell them? I think one of the things I first think about, and this is probably the biggest barrier of entry for me. I have talked about my background. I have a lot of experience in marketing, a lot of experience in employee management and those things. And what you would say is, I don't know, I'm going to air quote this, but I always feel weird these days, normal industries. Do I still have to do that, Dustin? Do I still have to say that cannabis is a normal industry, or do I have to air quote that? Can I move on past that in 2023? That's always a conundrum I have when I talk about real jobs in cannabis, because it's a real job and I appreciate that. But for some reason, I still, and maybe that's an internal thing here, I still hesitate at the last minute,
I feel like if we talked about it as if it was, if we talked about it in certain lights like that, I think you don't want to downgrade the amount of destruction and work that had to be done to even get it to that point. It wasn't like the cannabis industry built America in the 30s, or, like it wasn't this industrial revolution to a certain degree. If this is a relatively new industry having industrialization being applied to it. And with that being said, it was built on the backs of a lot of family members and a lot of people looking over their shoulders. And so as we get into today, our timeframes of how we work within cannabis, yes, the truth is cannabis is just like any other job. The fights that have gotten us there, you don't want to downplay, but at the end of the day, we are not looking over our shoulder. We are openly discussing this. We can still have a family and a career and a job, or we can have an active lifestyle and have this type of conversation, which really was only designated to a select few to have that freedom.
Yeah, it's definitely a difference, I think, in this topic. If we're talking cannabis is just like any other job, it's definitely a difference in who you are, where you came from, right? And I know we've talked a lot about the legacy markets, but I think when I think of what the bullet point on screen is, when I think of cannabis is just like any other job, I think of what prevented me, someone who wasn't in the cannabis industry, someone who felt like they could apply their skills to the industry. I think what prevented me from taking that leap sooner, or from maybe even now becoming more fully invested, is because I think of it as I don't know enough, or there is the legacy markets, or there is these other things that I have to think about. And so it was a struggle for me because I felt like I wasn't OG enough. I don't know. Does that make sense? I felt like I didn't have street cred, which sounds weird to say, and I mean that in the kindest ways, but I felt like I didn't have the legitimacy, or maybe even the appearance, right, to kind of rock. And, we play off that, our two appearances when it comes to being in there, stereotyping versus non-stereotyping. But that was, to this point, I was a little concerned that I didn't have that. And so it took me maybe from going all in, or from opening the doors to the cannabis closet, as Bryan Adams likes to say. But as I've gotten into it, and I would recommend to you, it is a job. Right. And it is a job. Right. And that's like any job, you have to do the jobby job things. You got to do the jobby job things. You got to show up. You got to be respectful. You have to ask questions. You have to do all these other things. So you have to treat it like a job. Like there are things that make it more fun. And part of it, what you just talked about, Dustin, is that we can openly talk about it. We don't have to worry about it. It is 2023. Those days of being secretive feel less, though there are still problems happening in certain sects. So we, admit that, but it is more just like a job. And I think that's when I think about this topic in particular, you just have to treat it that way and you'll be fine. Like you'll be fine. You can, we'll get to in a second, like you can be unaware of some things, but treat it like a job, act like a job. You're probably going to succeed. You'll probably succeed.
It's this weird expectation that people have. You said it this, to a certain degree, but to me, it's like if you want security within your day job, if you genuinely want all the things that you see to instill something like a career, something you can work towards for a long amount of time, or move up within, you do not want stoner culture being applied to your security, to the security of your children. You don't want to say, oh, I don't file that paperwork because in stoner culture, we don't fucking care about organizing, bro. Like, let's just wrap one up and smack it back. And it's this idea of, what is that expectation of what a business is supposed to look like? Even the most lenient and freedom-focused companies for the way they think about work and where it should be and how it should look, even at that level, say something like a Netflix, they still have bureaucracy and they still have normal business. So in order to have accounting and, days off for vacation, you need the bureaucracy of HR. You need that mundane key asset employee that helps facilitate that. And what do you expect that to look like? I really don't want long-haired hippie, mentality being applied to every single aspect.
It's a catch-22. It is a catch-22 all the time when it comes to this industry, because you want to be legitimate and you want to be honest and you want to be helpful and you want to appreciate and respect legacy. And you also don't want to be stiff, right? We're not Wall Street. We're not selling stocks. And those should be less stiff, if I'm being honest. But part of the allure or the appeal of this is the lack of rigidity when it comes to some of these things like dress code or other things. Like, and it's some places, I think you have to have that, but sometimes, and I think you want to make sure it's just a boundary, right? It's a boundary like anything else in this industry. But the only thing that we can say that definitely is the same in this industry is every other industry is to make sure that you ask questions, right? You ask a lot of questions. It is a job. And if you treat it like a job, we already talked about, you can succeed, but you're not going to know everything. We all don't know anything. I don't know anything. Even some of the greatest minds, if we had Andrew D'Angelo on the show, like he's someone who still probably is learning and appreciates that aspect. That's part of where this show, if we're being really kind of how the origin of this was Dustin and I wanting to learn, right? Wanting to continue that journey, wanting to continue to educate ourselves, talking with students and getting their ideas in our head and saying, man, I want to learn from more people. And so a lot of the people that we bring on the show, it is them talking to us about their experiences and us and Dustin and I feeling honored. I think honored is a good word for it.
Yes, honored is the word. Yeah.
To learn from them. And so when you are in a moment, and I think this is something, Dustin, that maybe, I don't know, want to say younger people. I think maybe even sometimes older people who are more established and confident. So I'll speak for myself, right? Being someone older who has pride and who has been around an industry, you want to think, I got this, I know it all. But there are intricacies to this industry and idiosyncrasies and legacy things and issues and social political aspects of it that should not be ignored, that are important, and the medicinal versus the adult use, the therapeutic versus the recreational. Like, there are intricacies that you should appreciate and pay attention to. And so if you are someone who's confident and established, if you are someone who's trying to make a lateral shift to cannabis, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Excuse me, person in front who's telling me something. Excuse me, young person. I don't know. I talk all fancy like the 40s. Like, excuse me. But I'm serious, all right? Ask question. You don't want the know-it-all, even if you know all the cannabis stuff. And this is a little tip I like to learn or talk about in leadership. Humility and pride. A lot of times I ask questions I know the answers to, and I just want you to answer it. You listening or someone, I want you to answer, because then you feel good and I feel good that you feel good. Teamwork.
I think it goes beyond that as well. It's when you can truly learn to teach something, then you can truly start understanding it and know that you know it. And in that regard, giving that opportunity, I also think that everybody who ever knows anything had to have at some point in their life that understanding that they don't, or else they wouldn't pursue more knowledge. They wouldn't be reading all the other books. They wouldn't be so laser focused at acquiring all of that. And it takes energy, time, and effort to acquire knowledge. It doesn't just fucking happen, like if you're just sitting in your room jacking off, like, I'm not getting much.
No, not a whole lot. I mean, stuff's happening. It's fun and enjoyable, but you're not, what's all my accents today? But it's not as productive, right? We talk about that all the time off the air, like trying to spurn productivity. And sometimes it is learning, and it is inspiration maybe from people, right? Sometimes that's a big part of helping motivate you. I feel the most energetic and fired up and ready to kick ass and take some names once we shut these mics off from a guest, David Patton, Andrew D'Angelo, like, Lauren Melee, like all these people we've had on, like as soon as we hit the end, I'm like, I can do that. They're awesome. I'm close. Let's do it. I feel it,
And what makes companies truly grow, at so much the beginning stages of a company are the vision trying to be pulled out of the owner's head. I have this thing in my mind, but I got to dictate it on paper and somehow convey that to a team that's going to make that a reality. And when I think about the companies that succeed and move at a higher efficiency, it's those ones with that openness to learn from each other. It's that we each may have a specialty, but applying our perception to the problem or applying our unique experience to that problem is really what's going to make this company grow. It's not necessarily was our answer correct. It was, how did we learn it? How did we come to that conclusion? How did we interact as a team when it came to this new set of information to be applied to this organization? And how do we move forward? And I have to say, as it applies to this, when we started the retail store, there was that notion of, I know, right? Because it was 10 years of working in a bedroom, 40, 60 hours a week, thinking through every ounce of that process. And so in some regards, by the time door one, even, the day one opened, I'd already been in it for 10 years. And so there is this thing of like, don't tell me what I don't know right now when you don't even know what I know because it's day one and you've never seen me work. But there was this amazing thing that happened, which was the minute I started asking questions, every single door opened. I cannot describe that enough. I went to a place to buy a couple glass cases, to display cases. And we were shown a 400 square foot room with 2 cases in it, clearly what was on the ad. I saw a semi-open door behind something and I said, hey, what's in that room? Clearly I could have just got my 2 cases and left. That's what they wanted. But instead there was an open door and I said, what is in there? And the guy said, actually, we have 7 more cases that we just wanted to get rid of for free if you want them, and it was like, we just saved $3,000 just because I asked what was behind that door. I went to a warehouse once, really, when we started on. I really did have the focus and the dream that this was going to be an American product shop. All the artwork was going to be, right? Well, when day one starting, it was not like that. When we went to seek out American artwork or local artwork, there wasn't a fucking directory of, call Dave, call Montana, call.
Especially 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so in doing that, you had to get out in the field and actually try to make those connections somehow. And so when we first were going to open, I only knew 2 American artists and we could only purchase, say, 60 pipes from them. Right? Like truly like walk into that door and we would have 8 cases, 1 pipe per shelf type of scenario. Really looked bad. I went to a warehouse looking for some more stuff for the store. And as I get into this fucking 5-story warehouse of like 1 million square feet, it was an auction house, like they would take in stuff as like a whole from companies. And then they would, right. So they would just house stuff for 3 months as they prepared for the auction. Either way, we get taken up to the grungiest, darkest, like for 200,000 square feet on that one floor. There were like 9 light bulbs to fucking, right? Either way, we're walking through. I go and look at the cases. I'm like, these are okay for the price. We're going to grab them, whatever the hell. I look over and I see 4 acrylic water pipes just randomly sitting in a tub, just 5-footers, just like, I know what that is. And why the fuck is that in this warehouse with all this, the most random shit, like 700 teddy bears with like a missing arm, like the most fucked up shit, 95 broken vacuum cleaners, like just the most random shit. Either way, the guy was like, oh, that's to this, and uncovers 200,000 square feet of fucking head shop product. And he was like, we have had this for a year and we don't even know how to get rid of any of it. We don't have a client. We don't have a customer. We can't do an auction. We're afraid of all. And I am just like, what did I just found the gold mine.
Like the eyes like, wow.
Yes,
like, yeah,
100%. And I never would have gotten to the stage where we could have gotten this stuff if I didn't ask, why the fuck do you have 5-foot bongs in your warehouse just randomly? It was the only thing uncovered. The only thing. And so this person ended up having 250,000 imported pipes and grinders and glass cleaners and papers and fucking, he just had everything. And we literally built our company the first year and a half, 2 years, were built off of that foundation of meeting that person for cases, them starting to sell us distribution products while we found the American blowers to subsidize and replace everything we needed to down the line. And gosh darn, like it all stemmed from a question. And yeah, and it's going to break into a couple other things I have to say later on. But again, ask the question. If you can ask the question and be open to the answer, you will you can't even know what's behind that door. You just can't even fathom.
Speaking of, glass and American glass, when did you first meet Gibby Dowdy of Licit Glass?
You know what? Actually, let's see. It was the craziest thing. We had another distributor named Tom, and Tom worked and owned a company called Zing Direct. Tom was just this unbelievably intelligent person who wasn't really a smoker. He got into the industry. He actually used to sell ice cream to grocery stores. And he was the first person to kind of
ancillary to the cannabis industry.
Well, yeah, right. And he was also one of the first people to really instill the value of like slotting and this idea of, like with him, I believe the story he would tell me was they would go into a grocery distributor, right? Or a grocery store. And the grocery store would make all the ice cream companies auction off the shelves that the ice cream was going to go into. And so off the rip, the grocery store made all the money on they never sold the ice cream. They basically made the money on the auction and that shelf. And so then you would win and apply all your metrics and your spacing of like, can I take the shelf down but pay extra less and maybe make more profit, and all of this notion of like how that would work. And then you would go an entire year and have to sell every ice cream that was sold. That was your profit in that spot. So either way, he instilled a lot of things, and he came into us. And one time we were talking about a prototype we were making that we had been working on for 10 years. And he was like, you know what? Every single store that I enter into on the East Coast, and I have 450 shops that I work with, every single store that I walk into, this man named Gibby from Licit Glass either is just leaving the store or is coming 30 minutes after I'm there or is on the shelf already, period. He's like, you got to find some way to talk to this guy. And so like Joe and I, like, okay, cool. Yes, we're looking, we're building up that network of artists that we're trying to communicate with. Not fucking a week later, does this guy walk through our door and in sandals in like 10-degree weather. He's in like shorts, t-shirt, and sandals.
I'm not surprised by that at all.
Right. And he walks through this door, and we're like, I'm just like, what is this? And he starts saying, oh, I'm a glass blower. And I'm like, oh, of course you are. Like, of course.
Speaking of.
Right. And
with love.
And so he ended up spending like 8.5 hours with us that day. He stayed in the shop. He watched how we worked. He watched how we interacted with customers. He brought all 500 pieces of glass out of the truck and unboxed it and displayed it in the store. And we talked about it. And it was just this phenomenal experience. I remember, calling Joe and being like, you got to come in and meet this guy. You're like, you have to meet him. We've been talking for 5 hours. This is like, he represents everything in which we truly stand behind. The way we look at business, the way we look at customers, the way we look at product lines, the way we look at price points, the way we look at quality, the way we look at marketing, the way it just went on and on. And in addition to that, at the end of the night, he, out of 10 years of working on our prototype and this secret development thing that we were doing, he was the only person that had walked through our door in 10 years that we genuinely trusted to make the prototype and not steal it. And we had a conversation about making our prototype, and he said, I will absolutely do that for you. I have no problem, let's create. I'm here for you on that. And 2 weeks later, we took it was literally the first 3 months of profit, there were things that had took away profit, like broken glass and shit like that. But we took every dollar that we had, drove out to Virginia, spent the weekend with the crew in Virginia, and they made our first actual fully functioning, exactly how we wanted prototype to a design that we had been working on for 10,000 hours.
Oh, that's awesome.
From that day forward, seeing him and his partner Craig at the time, it was it. We knew that we were going to work with this person forever, and from that day, it was like I had known this person for 25 years. And and again, it wasn't even, I never called Gibby. I talked to someone who said, you need to talk to this guy. And I said, I really want to. And then by having the door open, pow, Gibby ended up walking through the door, So it's just.
And all these years later, right, you're still hanging in, you're still having those things. I feel like if I could go back in time, back then, it would be to say not to burn bridges. I don't feel like I'm a bridge burner by nature. Like I'm not someone who's overall getting in there and causing such a scene. I don't like controversy, so I try to maintain, a pretty neutral, chaotic, maybe neutral for playing D&D alignment stance on most things in life. But there are a lot of forgotten bridges, right? It just the way it's like one of those analogies of like a spooky supernatural film where only children can remember these facts, and as you grow older, things just slip farther and farther away from your memory. I feel like sometimes, and especially in today's age, because not only do you have to maintain friendships that are we'll say intimate, not in a physical manner, but intimate and just in like an emotional manner, someone who you would miss talking to dearly, friendships that are acquaintances, professional acquaintances that you see on a regular basis, and you have to maintain this cordialness, and maybe you do enjoy their experience, or friendships that are virtual social networking friendships, and these things play just as an important part of that, because you never know if you're out there and you're putting out this public image. If you're like Dustin and I and Because Cannabis every Wednesday 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, subscribe please if you're like that, or follow us, Meet WM socially, every Monday, audio versions. It's like you have those conversations and you enjoy it. So it's just trying to make sure you have all those pieces. But I have a bad habit, being real, I'll do the honest button here. I got a bad habit of just not reaching back out, kind of forgetting about people, kind of just moving on to the next thing with the next person. I don't want to say that's your fate, Dustin. I'm not being, I don't want to say that, but I don't know, like in 7 years from now, are you just another in a long line of people that I have let go? And I try to catch up occasionally. It gets more awkward then. Sometimes it could lead to missed opportunities. So in this world of, connections and networking, and I think in the cannabis industry in particular, networking is crucial. You have to maintain those friendships the best you can. And one of the best ways to maybe, continue to maintain those friendships is to develop habits, get good rituals. I think successful companies are always, consistent by nature as well. And so you have to be consistent in being able to maintain friendships, and you have to be consistent in your business. The business changes, You have to be consistent in the fact that you're always willing to change. You have to be all those things. We talk about these things when it comes to consistency, whether it is just having a good plan and whether luck happens or whether it is just planning, but knowing first steps. And I feel like we're about to get a lecture here on exit strategies, knowing first steps and knowing last steps. You don't have to know every single step in between. You don't have to succeed in every step you take. Sometimes success is, the old 2 steps back, 1 steps forward thing. It's consistency and waking up and doing that. It's consistency as a writer. I read this thing when I was I went down a writer stretch, and it was about some of these really like famous writers, and they just would wake up every day. And the very first thing they did, they make their coffee, they get a little biscuit or something, and they just write for 30 minutes. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just like us turning on the microphone, Dustin, and for some of our pre-shows, if we recorded them, just talking, right? Just conversing, just writing, clickety-clackety, your fingers against the keyboards or your hand if you're going to long form it like a pretentious D. I'm just kidding, you long formers. Like those things, right? Just consistent routine and just the habit of and just words will make the synapses in your brain, sound effects, you're welcome, fire off. And it develops those types of things in consistency, And so I think that's it's another important thing. If I could go back, maintain those friendships a little better, develop these habits, these consistent good habits. And it's a struggle we all have. And just like friendships, you can always start anew, right? You can always start anew, Dustin.
I think it's the most heartbreaking thing about being a small business owner is you wear so many hats throughout a day, and so many people depend on you throughout that day that the worst things I had done was not maintaining the friendships outside of the business and outside of my network. Like I really, in a lot of ways, lost contact with a lot of friends that really did matter. Like their lives matter to me. And the inconsistency of me reaching out or the me always saying, you know what, I got to run to the shop tonight instead of going out to dinner because this small fire in which I see as this monumental task that has to be accomplished this week ends up always taking precedent over the most important things, which are those friends and the people who love around you. And much to the detriment of them. And so I think that, if there was one thing that I would ever want my younger self to truly think about is that it's not to lose the key relationships in which I valued more just because I thought that something else I was doing was larger. And it's not always larger. It's all something.
No, it's not, right? It has to be that thing. You have to be consistent. You have to be able to adapt. You have to just keep moving, right? You have to keep finding ways to keep moving on, regardless of what it is. And it can be hard in those moments. And I think that's something, if we talk about finding ways to reconnect with your younger self and your older self coming back and talking to you, I think it's that each little step, right? Each little step is okay. I think that's a message I would love for my future self, if there's one out there, to come back right now and say every lack of success you've had, every failure that you've had, it's okay. Like you hope it leads to something else. It doesn't always, but if you let that step, right? If you let that movement of something step you back and not that you succeed, if you just give up, you're not going to go anywhere, right? If you're not going to do anything, it's like you just said, you're just laying around all day doing nothing. So you have to continue to find ways to move. You have to continue to find ways to move. And movement, is important as a company, Dustin, because you have a couple of different ways that you can choose if you're going to move, right? You can move fast, you can move far, right? And those things don't always are mutually exclusive. Sometimes they can be, sometimes they're not. It just depends. But this is a saying you say often, Dustin. I heard this pop up on here. And so, as we think about that, like, as we kind of wrap up some of these ideas that we've had for the show. Thank you for joining us. By the way, we're going to talk move fast, move alone, move far, move with others to wrap up today's show. Don't forget to be here next week. We got a couple of great guests coming up in a row. We're going to take deep into science, have a fellow podcaster on. We got some more designers coming up. We got some really interesting guests coming up here on Because Cannabis every Wednesday on YouTube. Please subscribe. We would appreciate that. And then every Monday, audio, wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Wayward.media is the company that produces this show. Visit us, wayward.media, on the website, and then meet WM socially. So let's finish off with this, Dustin, about some of our future selves. We have to do this again. We only got through a few of them, but let's finish off with this one.
This statement encompasses every single thing we talked about, you know, and to me, it's what puts it in perspective at the end of it all. If it wasn't like any other industry, you would be hiding in your closet, still growing it away from everybody. You wouldn't have a team. You wouldn't have the ability to bounce ideas. And if you were, you know, like the consistency, when you're not consistent, that's what your team helps you do. It's today, I'm not able to give it 100%, but George next to me is at that level today. And in some regards, he is able to pick up that slack for me today. Yeah. And on Friday, I'm going to help carry his ass across the finish line because we're a team and what we're doing matters. And I don't want everybody, especially the young entrepreneurs out there who see themselves owning an ancillary business within this industry, I do not want them to underestimate the power of going with others, of taking it slow, of not having that vision completely conveyed off the rip, or to not being so tied to that vision that you can't account for another person's perception, or for someone to tell you that actually this part of what the company does means more to me and makes more of a difference to me than what you were thinking, and I define it completely different than you. And to recognize the emotional power behind the collective there really, really will make one of the most massive differences. It also kind of brings up this, the very last thing I want to say, which is having the ability to take a step back and seeing all you have accomplished. It's really important. When you're so focused on the next thing, you lose sight of what you've done. And you always feel like you're in a rat race until you can look back and be like, holy shit, there's this created. I now have this freedom in my day on Tuesdays, or I am at my kids' wrestling meets in which I never had that opportunity to be there. And taking a step back and seeing yourself for truly what you are in the past, present, and what you hope for yourself in the future. I hope that it includes others. I hope that it's not just this envision of yourself and only yourself.
I hope it includes others too. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right? I hope it includes you. I hope it includes some of the people that we've met along the way. So there's a lot of things I think we could tell ourselves, but thank you for joining us today with us a little bit. Speaking of helping others, there's one other person you could help out is us with our partnership with Licit Glass. If you don't know, we're going to have a live show coming up here on February 15th, 4:20 p.m. Wednesday on YouTube. If you go right now to wayward.media/giveaway. Follow the instructions on there to enter to win a mystery package from that aforementioned Gibby from Licit Glass, some fine American artwork. Dustin is not going to give away some cheap stuff. No, we won't even put down any other countries, but this is from America, fine artwork, wayward.media/giveaway. Follow the instructions. Make sure when you hit your social bits, use that hashtag giveawayword. Use that hashtag giveawayword on there. Thank you for listening for today's show, Because Cannabis. Great guests coming up here. Subscribe, please. We definitely appreciate it. Follow us socially at MeetWM, Wayward Media. Shout out to Gibby and Brian Adams, a couple of people we talked about today. Everyone, have a wonderful week. We'll see y'all next week, everybody.
Hi, guys.